with some webinars. Today's focus is on the Equal Opportunity Program and the non-discrimination requirements under the Act, as well as it found in Section 188. Today we have Miguel Calderon from the Department of Commerce's Equal Opportunity Office, as well as his staff, and an individual, I'm sorry, I forget your name.
TJ Shalowski.
Yeah, thank you, TJ. They'll be presenting the information today. I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea to provide the housekeeping. Appreciate you joining us, and have an enjoyable webinar today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Chelsea with Illinois WorkNet, and before we get started with the webinar, I'm just going to cover some housekeeping items just to make sure you're familiar with everything that's going on the screen. On the left side, you'll see we have our chat pod, and we have a lot of people already saying good morning and hello. And you can use that throughout the session today to add any questions or comments that you have covering the presentation, and we'll make sure they're addressed. And directly below the chat pod, we have a files pod. And in the files pod is today's presentation that you can download as a PDF. All you do is click on the title, and you'll get a button in the bottom left that says Download Files. And if you have any problems hearing via computer speakers today, we do have a conference call number, and I'll put that in the chat pod right now. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Miguel.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. Good morning and welcome to WIOA Wednesday. I am Miguel Calderon. I'm the state-level EO officer for the state of Illinois, and I'm joined by Tim Delimo and Randy Bischulte, who are the state equal opportunity compliance monitors, and TJ Shalowski, who is the director of Assistive Technology Services for the Illinois Assistive Technology Program. Today we're going to go over the background on accessible technology provisions in WIOA, why OneStops should care about accessible technology, examples of digital access barriers to people with disabilities and how to solve them, monitoring for compliance, Illinois Assistive Technology Program, and the WIOA 188 update. As many of you know, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act was signed into law in July of 2014. It supersedes the Workforce Investment Act of 1998, and it amends the Rehab Act of 1973. Essentially, it reaffirms the role of the customer-focused one-stop service delivery system, and it enhances coordination among several key employment, education, and training programs. WIOA and accessible ICT, or information and communication technology, provisions within WIOA state that all comprehensive and one-stop centers and affiliated sites must be physically and programmatically accessible to individuals with disabilities. ICT designed, procured, maintained, and used by OneStops must comply with non-discrimination and equal opportunity provisions of Section 188 of WIOA and its implementing regulations.
Miguel?
Yes.
We're getting some feedback or static, or is there any way we can move the microphone?
Sure. Is this better, Chelsea?
Yes, I believe that is better.
Okay, sorry about that. We're trying to put it in a central location so we could all reach it, but we'll just move it around as we go through the presentation. OneStops must use technology, including websites, online systems and courses, and applications that are accessible to individuals with disabilities. WIOA's revised Section 188 rule specifies that when developing, procuring, maintaining, or using ICT, a recipient must utilize ICT applications or adaptations which incorporate accessibility features for individuals with disabilities, are consistent with modern accessibility standards, such as Section 508 standards and the World Wide Web Consortium, and Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It must provide individuals with disabilities access to and use of information, resources, programs, and activities that are fully accessible, or ensure that opportunities are provided by the ICT that provide individuals with disabilities in equally effective and equally integrated manner, which essentially what we're saying here is that all of the programs and accessibility, or activities rather, that your one-stops are developing need you need to ensure that all individuals are able to utilize those programs regardless of any physical or of any physical limitations. As many of you know, when we talk about state and local certifications, I can see that on my physical and programmatic accessibility is one of the certification criteria OneStops must be eligible to receive infrastructure funding. State workforce development boards are responsible for establishing objective criteria and procedures for the certification process, and local boards use the state's criteria to certify their providers every 3 years. And I always recommend, as you develop your budgets and you ensure that you make appropriation, that you identify appropriation funding for assistive technology. Well, why OneStops should care about accessible ICT? Technology is everywhere in today's workforce development system. OneStops use websites, online systems, mobile applications, and other technology to promote and implement their products and services. But the technology used at OneStops can often be inaccessible to people with disabilities. And as a result of that, we create a digital divide between how the citizens that utilize the services with and without disabilities access key employment, education, and support services that OneStops make available to the public. Some examples of digital access barriers: websites that are not compatible with assistive technology, such as screen readers, training videos that lack open captioning and audio description, electronic documents whose images lack alternative text, and complicated web content that's difficult to understand. Inaccessible technology keeps the products and services that our OneStops are attempting to utilize out of the hands of key customer segments. It's a barrier to success and career advancement for people with disabilities. It limits opportunities for people with disabilities to get hired, and inaccessible online job applications can prevent people with disabilities from applying for jobs at your OneStop. And in addition to that, some other pitfalls there are, that's one of the things that we see here in terms of complaints that are lodged against various OneStops because their programs are inaccessible, or potentially litigation that can be filed by individuals who claim that they're not able to utilize the services that should be provided. So with that said, I'm going to pass it on to TJ Slowski. He is the Director of Assistive Technology Services for the Illinois Assistive Technology Program, and will give us a little bit more in-depth information on their programs and services.
Thank you. Hi. My name is, again, TJ Schlowski. Hopefully some of you have heard my name, and hopefully some of you have heard about the Illinois Assistive Technology Program. For those of you that don't know about IATP, I'm here to discuss what IATP does, some of the services that we can provide, and how it kind of dovetails into accessibility, talking about physical access, ICT, information communication technology accessibility, and so forth. So, IATP is a not-for-profit based here in Springfield. We are one of 52 tech projects in the United States. IATP was formed with the Assistive Technology Act of 1998. So we are a federally required program to talk about assistive technology to help individuals with disabilities and to help families. IATP's mission is to increase access to and the acquisition of assistive technology devices and services for individuals of all ages with disabilities. IATP provides AT information and services in the areas of education, employment, community living, and IT telecommunications. Our goal is to improve the quality of life for all Illinoisans with disabilities and enable them through greater access to assistive technology devices to fully participate in all aspects of life. IATP offers core services. The core services that IATP offers is device loan, assistive technology reuse and reutilization, demonstration center, low-interest financial loans. And on the bottom there, I messed up the order. Another core service, a new core service, is Information Communication Technology Accessibility. Other services that we offer are Assistive Technology Assessments, K12 Assistive Technology Assessments, Individualized Education Plan or IEP Support for students that have IEPs or 504 plans, the Work Incentives Planning and Assistance Program or WIPA, and also Assistive Technology Training. So we're going to go into a very kind of like a high-level description of what these certain services do and how they can help individuals. So Device Loan. Device Loan is a really awesome program. It's one of the core services that we provide. Device Loan allows individuals to try out equipment. The main sources or the main reasons for Device Loan is it can be used to help determine compatibility between users and devices. So individuals that have ever been exposed to assistive technology or maybe have sat through one of our trainings or maybe have come to IATP realize that assistive technology is a very expensive expenditure, unfortunately. So what the Device Loan Program does is allows individuals to try out the assistive technology before they buy it, essentially making sure that that tech will work with the goals and the ideas of what they're trying to reach. Not only saving money, but it's also saving time and making sure that we avert the equipment abandonment problem where individuals get technology and it doesn't necessarily meet what they need. Another very important aspect of Device Loan is to use it as a backup while something's getting repaired. So imagine that you're an individual that may not be able to communicate, may not be able to use their voice to talk about your needs and your wants. So you use a device to be able to communicate, and all of a sudden it breaks down. You have literally lost your independence. So through the Device Loan Program, while you are having that piece of equipment repaired, you have a backup so where you can still remain independent and be able to communicate everything you need to do. And that is very important to people with disabilities. Another one is to be able to be used while conducting an assistive technology assessment or evaluation with a therapist or another professional. So when an assessment is conducted for individuals with a disability, it is super important to be able to have equipment that they could possibly use during those assessments after they get the equipment or after the assessment is done. Some other key important ideas is that this Device Loan Program is completely free. It is completely free for K through 12 students, so devices can be shipped, and the Illinois State Board of Education has actually worked with IATP to make sure that equipment being shipped back to IATP is paid for. Now, if you are an individual that's utilizing this service that may not be involved with a school, you can check out the equipment as well for free, but you do have to incur the cost of shipping the equipment back. But other than that, if you were just to come into our office, pick up and deliver back, you'd be able to have a free device. Something that's very important is that these devices can be kept for up to 5 weeks. So that is something that would be very useful and gives you the amount of time needed to be able to try out those devices. So the next one program, our core program, is the Assistive Technology Reuse and Reutilization Program. So the idea of the Reuse and Reutilization Program is an assistive technology recycling program. So trying to provide technology to individuals in an economical or easier way is kind of the core idea of how reuse and reutilization works. Reuse will take anything from computers to durable medical equipment such as crutches or walkers or things that are used for individuals to be able to help and be able to get along and stay independent. The reutilization program takes this equipment, checks it out, updates it, makes corrections, possibly adds software, and then provides it to people within Illinois for free. So technology that still has some life left in it can be reutilized and ends up being at a very good cost savings. Now, how many of us have ever ended up having some type of a problem where we've broken our foot, or we've maybe had some type of a surgery where we've had a walker, and we end up getting crutches or something, and we use it for about 5 weeks, and then we stop using it, and it sits in our closet and just collects dust. These are prime examples of equipment that could be utilized through the reutilization program that can be donated and given back to individuals that may not be able to afford it or may have an inability to get to a location to be able to get the equipment. So a big thing that we always get asked about for the reuse and reutilization program is that our DME equipment, is it sterilized, is it clean? And we do have to adhere to specific OSHA standards for all of our DME equipment so that we are providing equipment that is sterilized and clean to the public that is almost as good, if not most of the time, sometimes better than buying it brand new. And so it's a very useful program. The reutilization program not only encompasses the calling and IATP and asking about equipment, but we also have a website that individuals can post information on that want to be able to advertise reused equipment. So next is our demonstration center. Our demonstration center is located in Springfield, Illinois. Our demonstration center is one of my most favorite parts of IATP. It literally allows for an individual to have hands-on access to technology. We have multiple centers ranging from vision to communication to computer access, even to kind of like our best idea that we have is where we have an exploded, as I like to call an exploded or dissected accessible apartment, where it includes everything from what a kitchen should look like to what a bedroom should look like to where a bathroom should look like. And then not only is what it should look like, but when we also have aspects of how we can take your existing bathroom, kitchen, or bedroom and make adaptations to where it best fits you. Now, the variety of assistive technology that is showcased ranges all over the place. It provides hand-on exploration, and it also provides the resources and information to be able to get anything that's in our demonstration center. One of our very newest types of sessions or actual rooms is the interactive sensory room for kids and adults. So it allows individuals to go in and try products for people that may have some type of a sensory issue or a cognition issue. And the biggest part is if you can't get to us, we will come to you. We try to definitely provide the technology and bring it out. Now, we may not necessarily be able to bring everything that we can, but we try to at least bring the information or the items that are possible. Because as hard as I try, I can't bring a roll-in shower to a location to demonstrate what a roll-in shower looks like. Financial loans. This is a very interesting aspect to IATP. All tech projects need to be able to offer financial services. And essentially what this is, it's a loan that individuals that typically may not be able to apply or get the loans through regular financial institutions allows someone to apply for a loan. Our ranges are from $1,000 to $30,000. We also provide loans for home modifications with a maximum of $5,000. So a remodel to your bathroom that would allow for that roll-in shower, or possibly providing some type of a ramp or a modular ramp for your home so you can get in and out. Those are the types of things for home modifications. Another important idea is a credit builder loan. We allow for these small credit builder loans at a very low interest rate. So it allows individuals to be able to develop credit so that they could possibly look later on down the road being able to apply for a car to have it modified or a van. And the idea of these low interest rates are very important as well, and that we also remind people that if you've applied for a loan before and you've been turned down, you typically, through our rates and our understanding, those same types of issues do not apply for our financial loans. So that's always important as well, because there is nothing more stressful than going and applying for a loan. Next, assistive technology assessments. So this is one of our first non-core ideas. These are some of our fee-for-service ideas that we have, our services. The Assistive Technology Assessment provides a fee-based for service assistive technology assessment to identify assistive technology needs. One of our biggest customers for this AT assessment is the Division of Rehab Services. DRS provides assistive technology assessments for their DRS clients, where we go out based upon their goals and try to accommodate and figure out what technology would work best to whether they become employed, whether they go to school, or whether they stay in their home. IATP offers on-site employment evaluation. We essentially will go out and conduct these assessments on-site because when we conduct an assessment, we need to be able to see how the individual is interacting with their environment, and the best way to do that is on-site. We also do recommendations for home modifications. So if you are needing a modified bathroom, if you are needing a ramp, if you're needing door widening, things like that, we will go in, we will take a look, we will write reports and provide recommendations. We also provide individualized training based upon those assistive technology assessments. So once you get a technology, we will train you on how to use that technology. And the biggest part is also the follow-up services. Before I had mentioned something about abandonment. When we abandon things, it's because possibly we don't know how to use it. So these types of follow-up services allow us to follow up and make sure that everything is being used, and if you have questions. K-12 Assistive Technology Assessment. So the K-12 is pretty much exactly like the Assistive Technology Assessment, but this focuses on school, in high school. This program is a free program that is offered by the Illinois State Board of Education. So anybody within Illinois, any student within Illinois that has an IEP or a 504 plan can ask the school to put in a request to have an assistive technology assessment. Now, assistive technology is covered through our K-12, but then also we have a very big program when it comes to augmentative communication or communication devices. So we will come in, we will do assessments at the school with the student, we will work with the special education staff, we will work with administration, and then we will also provide trials. This is where our services start to tie into each other. Along with the assistive technology assessments, not only can we pull equipment from our device loan, but then we can provide it so that the schools and the staff can try it and make sure that it works. Because, again, assistive technology is expensive, and when we have limited budgets, especially with schools, we need to make sure that we're providing the technology in a cost-effective manner. And the best way to do that is definitely try it out. Another service is the IEP Support, or Individualized Education Plan. So IEP Support basically assists parents and schools and staff with IEP and 504s. We train teachers, we train parents on the IEP process and try to work through issues that maybe individuals are seeing with IEP services. We work with college students on getting accommodations as well. So not only do we focus on the K-12, but then we post-secondary, trying to get those types of services for individuals in that education area. And then we also need to remember that IEP support doesn't always necessarily relate to assistive technology. So when we are looking for services, we don't always work based upon or focused on tech. We also look at possibly accommodations for extended test time or things like that that allow us to provide services for everyone. Now, the Work Incentive Planning and Assistance Program, or WIPA. This is a very awesome program, and hopefully some of the workforce centers are familiar with WIPA. So the Workforce Incentive Planning Assistance Program essentially is for individuals receiving Social Security, SSI, or SSDI. It explains how Social Security works, and it explains your federal benefits. But it also explains and tries to get individuals motivated to necessarily go back to work and not worry about losing their Social Security. For those of you that have worked with individuals that receive Social Security, the hardest thing is actually getting that Social Security, the time and the amount of time that it takes working towards getting that Social Security. And once you receive it, you have that mindset of, if I go back to work, I'm going to lose it. The cool thing about WIPA is that we take a look at your Social Security, We do a application, we figure out your assets and have that mindfulness of this is how much time or this is how much you can work and this is how much benefits you'll still be able to receive. With the idea of the knowledge that you get, you will end up going back to work. WIPA services are open to anyone between the ages of 14 to retirement age receiving Social Security. Next, the assistive technology training. IATP offers free introductory training on assistive technology products or services, kind of like what we're doing today. IATP also offers fee-for-service-based training on specific assistive technology. So if you're needing some type of in-depth training on how to use a screen reader, or if you're needing some in-depth training on how to possibly utilize some information communication technology accessibility ideas, you can contact IATP and we'll be happy to work with you on trying to figure those out. Now, the last and newest, and I probably get a little long-winded about information communication technology accessibility because this is my latest endeavor. This is what I've been working on. So information communication technology, or ICT for short, it used to be called EIT, Electronic Information Technology. So ICT accessibility encompasses all realms of digital information, websites, digital documents, computers, applications, emails, etc. So that is a very basic definition. And when Miguel was talking about ICT as well, we were having that definition, and it brought to mind what my formal definition is for ICT, my very long-winded, so people can understand and get the grasp of what ICT encompasses. So 2 years ago, MIT came up with a very nice definition of what ICT is. So I'm going to read it, and hopefully bear with me. So information technology and other equipment, systems, technologies, or processes for which the principal function is the creation, manipulation, storage, display, receipt, or transmission of electronic data and information, as well as any technology-based equipment. Information and communication technologies include, but are not limited to, academic and administrative software applications, websites and web-based or mobile applications, interactive online services, web conferencing, live streaming, live chat and discussion board functions, search engines and databases, electronic communications and electronic content, email, electronic documents, electronic books, and electronic reading systems, course of content, class assignments, library and course-related reference material, multimedia, audio and video, personal response systems or clickers, telecommunications, audio and video technologies, and self-contained closed systems such as ATMs, printers, and copiers. So, that is a mouthful, but it's expressing the idea of that everything, anything that is in that digital realm falls within these ICT accessibility, and we need to be cognizant that when we develop things or make things or post things or use applications or anything, they need to meet these requirements. IATP offers assistance with understanding ICT accessibility and how they meet and how to meet the required laws. So we not only discussed that these WCAG or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines within Section 508, but we also talk about our laws that are based here in Illinois. For instance, our Illinois Information Technology Accessibility Act. So now that I've been long-winded on that part, we'll actually swing back around and talk about it a little bit more. So what is assistive technology? So assistive technology is any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially, off the shelf, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of a person with a disability. So that is just the generic definition of what assistive technology is. So putting that into perspective, what are some examples of assistive technology? And it may kind of shock you about what is assistive technology. So here we go. We have some simple devices. So anything from like clocks to wristwatches. Modified forks, knives, and spoons. Literally, if you have a fork, knife, or spoon and you possibly take some insulation that you would have for a pipe and put it on just to expand the handhold, that's providing accessibility or assistive technology. Shoes with Velcro straps. My 5-year-old uses assistive technology every day by putting on her shoes by utilizing Velcro, even though we are going to start working trying to tie our shoes. But large button TV remotes, height adjustable desks, or ergonomic chairs. These are all basic, simple types of devices of assistive technology. Now, some other examples of assistive technology, complex devices, things that give anxiety when people see these. Computer-based assistive technology software, communication devices, hearing aids, cell phones, or cellular phones, or electronic devices. For instance, we have some images here on the right-hand side where we have a pair of glasses that actually have a device that you can use, that you can take pictures of books or of documents, and it will try to read it to you. High-tech pieces of equipment. We have pictures of communication devices where individuals will use these screens to be able to convey their wants and needs. And also, I'm sure a lot of people don't necessarily think about this, but the assistive technology devices that everyone carries in their pockets or their purses, whether it's a cell phone or some type of a smart device, is a piece of assistive technology. So, some general categories of assistive technology, and some categories that I know are important to some of the workforce centers that need to be covered. So we have low vision, blindness, or deaf-blind. We have deaf and hard of hearing. We have learning disability or cognitive issue, or physically handicapped. So common assistive technology for low vision, blindness, or deaf-blind individuals. Typically an electronic device, for example, is going to be needed, like a computer, tablet, or laptop, or smartphone, or some type of electronic device. Most of the time, a piece of software known as a screen reader, which is text-to-speech. So there's text on the screen, the software will speak it, and the individual will consume that information in an auditory format, is used. Or the possibility of screen magnification. Very simply, taking content that is on the screen and magnifying it to a size or adding color contrast that allows an individual to be able to consume that information. That's the idea of assistive technology. We try to provide things that individuals can consume in an easy, readable way. For instances of low vision, magnification devices are used. They can be both manual, like a magnifying glass, or digital, like a handheld magnifier with digital zoom. So, providing magnification can be done in multiple ways. Also, providing CCTVs, where it allows an individual to take hard print material, put it underneath a camera, and then they can adjust the size to be able on the screen to where they can consume that information. So, again, making information consumable by all individuals. Some advanced technology can be used by individuals that are deaf-blind. Typically, screen readers and braille devices are used for individuals to communicate. Those types of devices are very complex. Those types of devices are very unique. So, when we deal with individuals that have those types of multiple disabilities, they typically already have their technology provided. They know what they want, they know what they need, and they know how to communicate. The best thing, easiest thing that you can do is communicate with them and ask them what do they need. Another very common topic that's going to be on all these slides, again, is ICT accessibility. So, providing all of our information, all of our, what I can consider consumable information, our websites, our applications, our digital documents, our emails, need to be provided in an accessible format. And how do we do that? We utilize the standards and best practices that the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines dictate, or the Illinois Information Technology Accessibility Act. So, if one thing that you get from this presentation today is that you Google IITAA or you Google WCAG 2.0 and look at that information. All right. Common assistive technology for deaf and hard of hearing. The number one that is being utilized by the most common individuals with deaf and hard of hearing is the video relay service. This is a great product. This is something that we've always dreamed about, being able to communicate in real time, being able to see someone, and being able to talk back and forth, whether you're using an interpreter, whether you're using the relay service, or whether they're just doing face-to-face communication with other deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Open captions for online and other videos. There is nothing worse than being able to navigate the internet and going to a video that you need information and it not having captions for you, so you cannot consume that information. Live captioning for online webinars, being able to interact with webinars like what we're doing today that has captions so that people can read and be able to understand what the presenters are doing. Simple things such as voice amplification systems or personal FM systems, being able to take that information and be able to have it amplified to a volume that you can be able to understand and hear. Again, be able to consume. Hearing aids with T-coils or Bluetooth, having the ability to hook up your cell phone to your hearing aid so you don't necessarily have to worry about feedback or being able to worry about able to use your phone, or being able to use your cell phone with some type of an app for communication or texting. Again, ICT accessibility. ICT accessibility covers things or covers items for individuals that are deaf or hard of hearing, such as video, such as providing text transcripts of audio or podcasts. So there are sets of rules that we need to be aware of and cognizant because we are responsible. As soon as we start putting out that information, we claim responsibility for that information that we put out. Common assistive technology for individuals with learning disabilities. Some common ones that we see here are text-to-speech. So being an auditorial learner or being able to process in a different way. So providing those tools to be able to learn or consume that information. Text-to-speech, speech-to-text. So say, for instance, an individual is creating content. A lot of the times, utilizing a different form of output, speech-to-text could possibly work. Utilizing literacy suites. Literacy suites are awesome tools that allow you to have multiple types of function, whether it allows for text-to-speech, allows for definitions or thesaurus, or sometimes even word prediction, allows for those individuals to be able to create information in an easier, more content-aware way. Also, very simple things by using digital recorders for individuals that may have problems with processing or retention of long-term memory. These digital recorders allow individuals to be able to record conversations with permission, of course, to be able to go back and refer to later, or note-taking aid. The easiest tool is being able to take out your cell phone and be able to take self-notes to where you can go back and refer. These are super important, especially when we start working with clients that may have those memory issues, and it may not necessarily be an individual with disability. I myself need to make digital recording notes all the time. So it's good. It's a good habit to have. Common assistive technology for the physically handicapped. So being able to have height adjustable work areas or work surfaces, ergonomic chairs, keyboard trays, adaptive input devices such as like keyboards or mice, or even using speech to text. So there is always the best way, or the best rule of thumb is to be able to manipulate the work area to the individual. Okay. Again, we come back to this information communication technology or ICT accessibility. Hopefully everyone's getting the idea of how important this ICT is, because it is a massive job. So again, ICT encompasses all digital media, websites, social media, digital documents, Word, PowerPoint, PDF. We live in a digital age where we do massive amounts of PDFs. So it is important that we know that when we provide these documents that they're in accessible content. Being able to provide videos, being able to provide applications and systems that we utilize. A very important, like I said, something that we need to reference is the Illinois Information Technology Accessibility Act. IITAA encompasses anyone, whether in the executive, judicial, or legislative branches of government that accept funds from the state of Illinois, need to require that they meet IITAA or WCAG 2.0 compliance. If you need more information on that, you can definitely contact us. IETP is definitely a tool that people can utilize. We have our websites, we have some emails, we have a specific ICT accessibility portion that we can talk about. The idea of assistive technology is something where we are going to be working towards and providing information to our clients and our customers, and being able to make sure that we are inclusive. But making sure that we have a universal design or universal concept where we have one area, one device, one topic, one document that works for everyone. And that's the main idea. And I think that is kind of encompasses what we want to do for this group, and that specifically your rule of 188, when I honestly went out and read the rule for 188, and it is awesome because it is very inclusive, and it works on all of the groups that we want to be able to provide services to seamlessly without any type of discrimination. So again, TJ Shalowski from the Illinois Assistive Technology Program. Hopefully you heard about us. If you haven't, you have now, and we hope to hear from some of you, and we are always there to help and talk and figure out whatever our problems are, because almost anything can be fixed. That's what I always tell all of my staff. So thank you.
Thank you, TJ. This is Miguel. We're going to take a minute now to answer any questions that the audience may have before we move on with the presentation. So if anyone has a question, feel free to type it into the chat box, and we will respond. We have one from Karen Allen. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Do you want to answer that question?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we have some questions, Karen Allen. Is there anyone who provides free one-stop staff training, use of assistive technology equipment at our one-stop, but we have staff that have used the equipment in, okay, there we go. All right, now we can see it here. Is there anyone who can provide free one-stop staff training on the use of assistive technology equipment? We have the equipment at our one-stop, but we have staff that have not used the equipment in the past, and they need retraining to be able to adequately assist customers with disabilities at our one-stop. So yes, IATP is an entity that would fall probably within our fee-for-service realm of assistive technology training. Now, as far as free, you could always try contacting or looking at the vendors of the assistive technology you have. Sometimes some of the vendors do offer free webinars or some type of video training that they offer. Other places, when it comes to free, you could also look at some of your centers for independent living throughout the state. They may have individuals that could provide that free training. All right, so another question from Joanne Johnson. TJ, our local area will need to purchase some additional equipment. Can you provide specs on such equipment? So we have provided some specs to some of the workforce centers here. We have also worked with DCO and kind of came up with an assistive technology list of equipment that is very vague on purpose, but the idea for assistive technology that I've been working towards is the rule of thumb is free. Free is good. Free is the idea that you don't necessarily need to be 100%, but you also need to be able to have some type of an area that an individual would be able to utilize. And free would help that. So utilizing screen readers that are free. Things that we have on here. Do you just want me to read this, or did you want to?
What I'll do, I'll send them a copy of that list to each and every EO officer. You could read it.
Okay. So that was Randy. We have this list that we have created, and some of the things like the Kensington trackball mouse, stickers for zoom caps on your keyboard. You don't need to buy a $100 keyboard that has larger letters on it. You can go out and buy a pack of stickers for $14 and make it bigger. Some general monitor sizes that are best practice. Some ideas for a CCTV. Utilizing built-in technology. So what a lot of people forget is that Microsoft offers some built-in technology within their operating system. So as long as you have at least Windows 7, possibly Windows 8, or even better, Windows 10, you have access to this assistive technology, like Windows Magnifier or Windows Speech Rec, or even have the ability to add color contrast through some of the settings within Microsoft, not Microsoft Office or Word, Microsoft Windows. Utilizing free technology for as a screen reader, one that comes to mind is NVDA, or non-visual desktop access. Now, the idea, though, is that this goes hand in hand, that you can go out and download these things, but you have to have the staff, the dedicated staff, that have the knowledge to know how to use this technology. And then you also have to update this technology, because as time goes and as technology goes, things update, things change. As we all know, how many of us are still using the first iPhone? Well, we're not, because technology has gotten better and technology has gotten newer, and we always have to be cognizant and update our information. And providing an individual that this is one of their primary goals or primary ideas or purposes, that's also super important. Because unless you use the technology or having to be mindful or updating it, you forget about it. So hopefully that answers some of your question, and Randy's going to send out that list of technology. So let's see, we've answered Joanne. Now the next, Tania. Are resources available to help make documents toolkits more accessible or adapted to universal design principles? That is a great, awesome question, just like the other one. So yes, there are resources available. One of them is IATP. I'm going to, toot my own horn there. But there are tons of information out there. And it's almost getting to the point where it's almost too much information. But if you, some good points of contact or some good reference or resources, there is a website called WebAIM, W-E-B-A-I-M. It specifically talks about ICT accessibility. It talks about how to make accessible Word documents, PowerPoint documents, Excel, PDF. It provides you a ton of information out there. Now, there are also a bunch of companies out there that will talk about ICT accessibility and charge, because it is a business. There are entities out there that deal with website accessibility and digital document accessibility. IATP offers our ICT services. We provide we will provide web page audits. So you can call up IATP and we will provide a 3-page web page audit where we will go out, take a look at your website. We will audit your website to the Illinois Information Technology Accessibility Guidelines, and then provide you with a document saying, okay, here are your problems, or if you're here's how you fix it, or you're good, you don't have to worry about it. We also provide technology training on how to make accessible documents. In-house hands-on training, because my feeling is that a lot of times people need actual hands-on training how to create digital documents. So we focus on how to make accessible Word documents, because most of our source PDFs are Word. So if we make an accessible source, we make an accessible PDF. We then also provide services or conversations on how to make accessible PDFs. If you say, for instance, you have a PDF and you don't have what it was made in, you still have to make that make that application accessible. There are videos out there. Social Security actually has, SSA actually has some accessibility documents that are put together. The problem, though, is that accessibility is not a new thing. Accessibility has been around since 2000. And then in 2008, IITAA came along, and so it's been around. Some of our source documents, like Social Security, they're talking about Microsoft Office 2007, 2010, so they're not necessarily utilizing the newest software. They're utilizing older versions of Adobe Acrobat. So sometimes things change, sometimes it's not so a one-for-one, but there are resources out there. And you can look. Another good resource is the Department of Rehab Services. If you look at the IITAA, it is under the division, or the Department of Human Services, the Division of Rehab Services. And there are a bunch of help links and help documents out there on how to make accessible documents and how to make accessible websites. And we also have some groups that get together. So the realm of accessibility is very huge, but start small. Definitely look at IATP, definitely look at WebAIM, look at the Division of Rehab Services resources, and then expand from there. Okay. That we just went and read that.
I mean, is that okay? Okay.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you for these questions. I appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll have more Q&A time if people think of something else.
Exactly. Thank you, TJ. Yeah, and thanks for the questions. We're going to move on with Randy Bischolte. He's going to talk a little bit about the monitoring process, and then we'll leave some time at the end to do another Q&A session.
Good morning. My name is Randy Bischolte, and I work for Miguel Calderon, and I'm one of the compliance monitors. This morning, I'm going to speak about recipient monitoring. More specifically, the WIOA Contractor Provider EOA ADA Evaluation Form. The reason I'm going to talk about this form is because it's an annual requirement that each and every contractor provider is monitored. So your EO officers or whomever, someone has to monitor annually each and every contractor provider. The form that I'm providing or talking about today is very simple. Yes. It has 20 questions, and they are, in fact, yes or no type questions. But before you use this monitoring instrument, you must know the sources of the questions and the reasons for those questions. In other words, you have to go back and look into such things as the DCEO monitoring instrument. You have to look at your EO posters. You have to look at your contracting officers' request for proposals. You have to look at the Illinois Accessibility Codes. You have to also be familiar with the facilities assessment checklist and what goes in there. You have to know your MOA, and you have to know something about the surveys we send out, particularly the staff surveys. Let's begin. As you look at this monitoring form, starting with the heading, you look at the name. You must enter the name of the contractor and the address. The address is important because these contractors, at times, they would change a location. And the thing about it is, if a location was in fact changed, that new site has to be monitored for accessibility. In addition, you also look at the programs being monitored, whether it's adult, youth, or disability. And you look at the date of the assessment. In other words, we want to make sure that you get out there annually or sometime within the time frame that's required to monitor these contractors or providers. On the monitoring evaluation tool, the questions have to do with EO. In other words, who is the EO officer that's been identified as the EO officer for that contractor provider. Just remember one thing, though, that for contractors or providers with less than 15 employees, the EO officer does not have to go through the same process as it would that we do to designate an EO officer. All that's required is that they have to name one person who could answer the questions that has to do with EO and discrimination and things like that. We also look at the non-discrimination contract clauses. Now, what this is telling you in essence, it's not just the EO officer or the renters or the counselors that's involved with the EO program. It's also implying that your people who are in fact involved with making those contracts or RFPs and so forth must know something about what's in that contract. For example, what we look for, what you should be looking for, would be the clauses. Are the EO rules included in the contract? What about the facilities requirement? In other words, the contractor must say that he's in compliance with the EO rules and that his facilities are in fact accessible. And lastly about that, he's also saying that his programs are accessible to people with disabilities. In essence, if there is a need for assistive technology, this is where you would look. And this is where the contractor should discuss with you if in fact he needs assistive technology or he has to get assistive technology for his applicants. The next thing is that we must have the appropriate notices and communications present. In essence, we're looking at your posters, or what you as the EO officer doing the investigation or monitoring should look at for posters. You should also look at to see if the EO officer was identified. And also, you must look to see if that contractor or provider has a method of reporting discrimination complaints. The next thing is the accessibility measurements. This is mostly about the facilities. And this is where I use, or you would use, the facilities assessment tools. But you don't have to use that complete monitoring instrument because it's right there in that tool that we provided. In essence, that tool was simplified to make it easier for you to get the most significant information about what you have to do in reviewing or monitoring facilities assessments and so forth. Also on that tool, we will look at the reasonable accommodation and LEP policies. Let me combine that with the sexual harassment policy. In essence, for these two different areas, they must be written or printed. They must be publicized and posted. So we're just keeping it simple, but what you're looking for is that you're making sure that those policies are in there. And what goes into those policies, you would normally find in your MOA and other documentation that we use at the state or in the WIA. Also, what you check for when it comes to, say, the applicants and the administration of the files and so forth, you check to see if, in fact, confidential information is appropriately secured. In essence, you should not have medical information, prescriptions or medical analysis and stuff like that in the same regular file as you would, say, with the application files. This should be stored in a separate file, locked and secured. And this should be locked in a separate container, and access to those particular files should be restricted to, say, the director, the designated counselor, an authorized monitor or inspector, and or possibly emergency personnel. As you can see, this form is located in the back of your monitoring instruments that I've provided you through the years. If you don't have it, I will send you a copy of this updated copy. In fact, I'll do that just to make sure that you have it and that you can look at it. And the most important thing about this form is that you have to prepare yourself to use this form so that you can monitor your contractors or providers. It sounds simple, but you have to know exactly what you're doing when you answer these yes or no questions. And then at the end of the form itself, there are a bunch of important websites. And those websites are also available on the EOMC website, which is the part of DCO website. Are there any questions?
Okay, so if there's no questions, good morning, everyone. This is Tim Galimo. I wanted to speak to everybody a little bit about basically what's new in the non-discrimination and equal opportunity provisions of the law. Apparently, there were some questions that were raised after the methods of administration was released on the ePolicy website. And some of those questions, I think, were asked of policy staff as to, kind of what has changed and what are the new responsibilities or what will be ensuing from having to go forth with these new provisions. So I wanted to talk about some key aspects, and hopefully most of you who have already been doing the local equal opportunity monitoring and checks, you'll already be fairly familiar with what I'm going to be speaking about. So basically, this slide has a couple points about some of the revisions to the regulations. And the Civil Rights Center basically updated within the new provisions of the law to align themselves more or less with current law and legal principles, because as everyone kind of knows, the provisions within discriminatory law changes almost daily. And so in order to effectively keep up with that, sometimes rules have to be maybe broadened a little bit to provide cover for people and for changes, especially when it deals with persons with disabilities. So simply put, like Section 188 prohibits discrimination against individuals in any WIOA Title I financially assisted program or activity. And that would include, the job training for adults and youth and the programs and activities that are provided by all the American Job Centers. For the most part, that's already been accomplished through the many years that the local areas have been enacting these provisions. The changes that are reflective are basically already imposed by the federal government on states. So very simply put, the revised rules really just expand on the provisions that were already in the Workforce Investment Act since '98. So the rules, updated provisions generally reflect the non-discrimination laws that are already in place. But in order to go through those provisions that have been elevated, basically, I'm going to touch on a couple key Section 188 changes that we're going to be talking about here. So, the rule makes clear that sex discrimination, including discrimination based on pregnancy, childbirth, and other medical conditions, are enforced. The regulations clarify, basically, that discrimination based on national origin, including failing to provide language services to someone who is limited English proficient, is basically covered. So as such, the recipients must take responsibility and make all steps possible to ensure that individuals with LEP have meaningful access to all aid, benefits, services, and training. These steps may include oral interpretations and written translations of both hard copy and electronic materials in non-English languages. This ensures basically that individuals with LEP are informed about and are able to participate in covered programs and activities. So the rule clarifies what documents are considered vital. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later once I talk about the Babel that will be included in people's websites and on important documentation. But basically, the rule will require recipients to record the limited English proficiency and preferred language of applicants who seek to participate in the workforce development system to help ensure that they have the necessary information to serve individuals with LEP effectively. The rules also updated language used to ensure that the definition of disability is interpreted broadly. This will enable more individuals with disabilities to effectively be served in the workforce development system. The rule also addresses accessibility requirements, such as information electronic technologies that TJ has so eloquently spoke about. And on top of that, it finally does include service animals, the inclusion of what is allowed and what isn't allowed, and all the factors that go into treating people with service animals at the local areas. The CRC revised the equal opportunity of the law notices and posters, and they're required now to make sure that individuals participating in their programs and activities are aware of the scope of the non-discrimination and equal opportunity responsibilities and the recent developments in law. So, for example, the changes reflect that under the category sex as a prohibited basis for discrimination, they've expanded that to include pregnancy, childbirth, other related medical conditions. They've also included under sex transgender status. So that would include things like gender identity and sex stereotyping. Similarly, the changes make clear that discrimination against persons with limited English proficiency is a form of national origin discrimination. So, on the basis of transgender status, gender identity, sex stereotyping, these are all kind of in accord with the recent developments that everybody has been seeing, on nightly news and all that under the civil rights laws. And so that have been enacted by both the federal government and state governments. In addition, the rules acknowledge the interpretations flowing from this area of the law, particularly with regard to discrimination based on sexual orientation. So those will continue to evolve. The rule specifically states that in Section 188's prohibition of discrimination on the basis of sex, at a minimum, sex discrimination related to an individual's sexual orientation is established by the discrimination based on gender stereotypes. I think most everyone would probably be fairly familiar that the methods of administration had 9 core elements. That's what they were called. And most recently, the changes in 29 CFR 38 and Section 188 do away with those elements. So they will no longer be called things like assurances, notice and communication, data and information collection and maintenance, and so on and so forth. Instead, they're going to just be referred to as sections. And so those sections, while they refer directly to what used to be the elements, they are no longer termed that as such. One of the major improvements and inclusions in the new law are that the governors now must designate an individual as a state-level equal opportunity officer who reports directly to the governor and is responsible for the state program. This is something that has never happened before. State equal opportunity officers always reported to the directors of such agencies that were distributing the funds for WIA type programs. So the state level EO officer must have staff and resources sufficient to carry out these requirements. Another large change that I spoke about briefly was in the LEP Notice of Communications. Basically, they expanded on what vital information would be, and whether that's written, oral, or electronic. It's information that's necessary for an individual to understand how to obtain any aid, benefit, service, or training necessary for the individual to obtain such aid, benefit, service, and training, or as required by law. So basically, the regulations are clarifying that discrimination based on national origin includes failing to provide language services to someone with limited English proficiency. And so one way that, an active way that the CRC decided to make these changes was just with the initial notice of communication. And that everybody will probably be aware of is the Equal Opportunity is the Law poster that goes up on the walls in every recipient's office. So besides English, the Equal Opportunity of the Law posting must now be posted in Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, French, French Creole, Korean, Portuguese, Russian, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. And those posters have been printed up by our office with the help of CMS, and they're being distributed when Randy and I go out to monitor the local areas. And we take enough of these posters so that every recipient, and that would include the training providers, must include all of these posters in a prominent area in their office. Another new inclusion is the Babel notice. And so a Babel notice just is a short notice included in a document or electronic medium, like a website, app, or an email, in multiple languages, informing the reader that the communication that they are receiving contains vital information, and that it helps explain how to access language services to have the contents of the communication provided in other languages. So the Civil Rights Center developed this sample notice that's up on the slide. And what they would like all training providers, all recipients to do is to provide those Babel notices on any information that is considered vital, and vital was the definition that I had previously given you. Recipients will need to translate these notices into other languages to meet the needs of the local community, and also the Babel notice does not replace any of the obligations for recipients to provide individualized language services. So just to give an example of what that might look like, the very notice that was on the previous slide has been translated by the Civil Rights Center in the languages that I already specified that needed to be inclusive. So these are examples of what LEP Babel notices would look like. Typically they would be on the bottom of websites, they would be on the probably business cards or other, information that somebody would have to ascertain in order to receive an aid or a benefit. There's also been a change to require basically additional information collection. And that would be basically each recipient has to maintain and submit to the Civil Rights Center upon request a log of any complaints that are filed with the recipients that allege discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, and that's including pregnancy, childbirth, and other medical conditions, as well as transgender status and gender identity, national origin, of course, and that's including limited English proficiency, age, disability, political affiliation or belief, citizenship or participation in a WIOA financially assisted program. So beginning January 3rd of 2019, each recipient must make sure that they have the ability to record the preferred language of each applicant that's served. And that would be applicant, registrant, participant, and terminee. Now, one of the largest components of changes, I should say, is that's reflected in Section 188 is instead of periodic monitoring, the state is now obligated, as well as the local recipients, to annually monitor all the recipients that receive federal funds. Okay, so the non-discrimination plans that are taking the place basically of the methods of administration that all the local offices have written, they must now include copies of all the monitoring reviews. So the local offices will be responsible for providing basically the same type of monitoring that Randy and I provide to the local offices, but to their local individualized trainers. Those will then be incorporated into their non-discrimination plans, and that will be then sent on to the Civil Rights Center on a yearly basis. That means we have a little bit more work to do than just periodic monitoring. There's been some updates to the disability rights, but mainly, as I've said, the updated language is basically going to try to ensure that people with disabilities are basically being treated with respect and to what they need, and they're being served adequately. So the main change to that will be addressing like the accessibility requirements for electronic and information, as well as service animals. There's also been, for universal access, there's been a little bit of updates, which is taking, basically the appropriate steps to ensure people that are trying to be eligible for these programs, that they are able to receive these programs. And so one of the main things that we've come across in this office that I just want to make a slight note of is LWIAs that have residency requirements to serve those people that only live in their local areas. That's not really allowable. This is a federal program, thus there can't be any kind of like priority of service for people that because they live in a certain area that they are served, whereas other people aren't. So if you come from Timbuktu, Tennessee, and you want to receive training in Illinois, and you're more than welcome to come to American Job Center and receive the same type of training that they would receive in wherever they would live. That's, geography has no stay for whether or not someone's served. So some examples of that would be like, to make sure that universal access is available. During, the welcome or orientation, you ask all customers if they need assistance. You make information available to all customers. Avoid, assuming any kind of assumptions that certain customers may or not be interested in certain services. You also have to provide options for career assessments, both, online and on paper. And you have to provide the information online, self-directed, when you use self-directed methods, as well as in group and learning sessions. So you want to provide that information in multiple languages, and you want to use signage and graphics and pictures combined with text to help people understand. So with that, I'm going to open the floor to any kind of questions, and hopefully we'll have some answers for you. Miguel?
Okay, it looks like our first question's from Joanne Johnson for Randy. Does service provider contractor need to be monitored? And I think you can...
Yes, Joanne. Every service provider or contractor has to be monitored. But remember, we've spoken about ways to do this. If it's in your area, you do it. But if it's in someone else's area, you can coordinate with that person to get a copy of their monitoring report. Does that answer your question? But it has to be done every year. Yes.
Okay. Did you have anything else?
That's it, unless she comes back with something else.
Okay. The next question is from Kim McCarthy. I'm sorry. Did I miss that one?
Rory Callahan.
No, I have Kim McCarthy here.
Okay.
So with those written format changes, do we need to completely change our MOA to reflect this? And she's referring to the new changes to the section.
Well, any of the changes that I just spoke about, basically we have a whole new law. So there no longer is going to be a methods of administration. It's now a non-discrimination plan. And so everything that has to be incorporated in that is in the new law. So yes, all these changes will have to be in a written format within the non-discrimination plan. Hopefully that answers your question, Kim. And then you asked how big are the posters. The posters are 24 by 36, and it says, do these posters have to have the local EO officer name on them? If so, we really need it electronically so we can edit them. Yes. They do have to have the local equal opportunity officer's name. I'm pretty sure Randy has been out to your local area just recently, and he brought the posters out there. And so you should have a series of all those posters in your office. If you don't, please contact Randy, and it won't just be your office, but it will have to be all the providers that you have. They have to have them up as well. You can have them electronically to put your name on it. We can send those out to you. That's not a problem. The ones that we are issuing have the state of Illinois seal on it, and so it has all the state information instead of local EO officer information. So if anybody really needs to have those for the local EO officers, just let Randy or I know, and we can probably get those out to you without a problem.
You missed one question on there from Rory Callahan, and he was asking me to send him a copy of that data collection form. It goes way back. And the answer is yes, I'll send it out to him.
Okay. here. And obviously, because of the time constraints, we're not going to be able to get to everyone's question during this call, but what we will do is we will respond to everyone who participated via email with the response to each of the questions, and then if there's any other documents that were inquired about, we'll make sure and provide those also. This next question is from LaDonna Russell. What would be considered vital information? Would it outreach documents such as marketing documents, WIOA applications, et cetera?
Hey, LaDonna, this is Tim again. Yes, you are correct. Vital information, again, just so everybody's clear, it's basically any written or oral or electronic information that's necessary for an individual to understand how to obtain any aid, benefit, or service or training. So you're correct, strategic planning or marketing and outreach, maybe consultations with community groups or operational collaboration among the partners, intake, registration, orientation, service delivery, and the actual training, how to go about getting that. That should all be included. So hopefully that answers your question. Mike Hoppenshaw, will DCEO be developing method tool for recording LEP on IWDS?
That's not training.
I think, really, I mean, that's something that we have to have some internal discussions about.
Yeah, LEP is already included on the intake forms for at least customers, right? So if somebody's coming in, though, who's just basically applying, isn't quite yet, well, maybe it's just an inquirant. Even inquirants need to be able to, you'll have to take down that data. So yes, I'm sure we're going to have to include that in IWDS because that's a new provision that has not ever been a focus. So, you know, once we are able to get program staff to be able to facilitate that, we can get moving on it.
Want to take one more question here?
Sure. Rory, regarding the Babel notice, the slide in the presentation gives an example of a notice where it would include a phone number. Would we use that PROPIO phone number for the providers to give out? Yeah, I mean, you can always do that, Rory. And for all the EO officers, I would probably include your phone number in the office, though, too, so that they can actually, you know, have a contact in case they go through a private interpreter or they have somebody else that's trying to interpret for them. But PROPIO, I mean, that can go on almost any documentation just so that people know that you are basically complying with the LEP standards that's imposed by the law. For all those who don't know what PROPIO is, it's a language line service that allows virtually 255 different dialects or so be translated into whatever language is necessary so that communication can exist between people trying to receive services versus you know, the person that's trying to offer the services. And then John Scranlin, are posters needed at training providers with multiple buildings and locations, i.e. community college? Yes, absolutely. The law is real clear when it says all recipients. So yes, we've been mounting those posters when we go out monitoring, and we've been taking pictures of all the layouts. And so basically we want to make sure that all of the training providers that you give like ITAs to and so on and so forth, they have that notice up so that people don't have to second guess whether or not they have, that they understand their rights. So if there's, it looks like that's all of the questions.
Okay, that's it. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to give our either Tim, Randy, or myself a call or shoot us an email. I know there's several other questions, I think, here on the side that we didn't get an opportunity to get to, but we will respond to everybody that had a question. and provide any additional documentation that might be useful to the group.